Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Lifestyle Mastery, and I'm excited to have Christophe Pasquier, who is the founder of Slide, which is a collaborative workspace where remote teams get their best work done. Built since 2016 in remote, it's the ideal documentation and communication tool for remote teams and comes with the best templates and advices for these teams. A big thank you to Alexander Louisi from Upflow for the introduction. Welcome to the show, Christophe.
Thanks, Rohit.
Awesome. So, you've been in the remote space. How did the journey start with Slide, and why do you want to build it?
Yeah, so I mean, we didn't start like with the intention to be in remote, but in 2016, basically our first employee, our first employee, which is like a co-founder for us today, was 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers away from Paris. I was in Paris with my co-founder, and we just knew this guy, friend of a friend, and he, was terrific, and it was like a no-brainer for us. And we really didn't think about it before, but we just, got into the whole remote game without even realizing it. And first it was like in France, and we had people a bit everywhere. And obviously we turned the company culture around it, and we started very, very fast to kind of think about that. And because it was so close to the business that we were starting, it actually shifted the whole business model, the whole business actually, not model, but the value prop of Slide. So we were building a note application for Teams. So it was really the idea at the beginning to be similar to what Slack did with communication. We will do to documentation. So having a form factor, the note taking app that was so nice to use, so easy to use, simple UX, super fast as well. Bring that into Teams so that they would start to kind of share and have by default a knowledge of the team accessible by anyone. And so yeah, when we started to do that, we didn't really know where we were going at first. We just knew that this was a product that we would use every day, and doing that while being in remote, which again was not planned for, actually made complete sense, because since day one, or since month 6 really, we basically had this ingrained in our DNA that we were building for remote teams, and as a remote teams. And when I say for remote teams, of course, today, it's a bit more obvious. At the time, we didn't say remote because, you only had maybe 1,000 remote teams in the world. But we said async first, or teams with heavy written culture. So teams that really tried to kind of work by writing, to be thoughtful about what they did, to be clear in the decision-making, to share them by default, to have clarity on what was happening. So, for instance, at the time, the examples that we had were Stripe. Stripe in 2017 was sharing all the emails by default, so even anybody in the team could access Patrick Collison's email, for instance, and they had very elaborate kind of ways to share knowledge. They had a Hackpad, which was the ancestor to Dropbox Paper, that they were using to kind of share documents by default, to put by writing, and then they were consolidating in another tool. So yeah, anyway, we basically had at the very, very start of our adventure, this mix between kind of remote working and everything that comes with it. So explicit culture, working by writing and so on, and the tool that were really a perfect match.
Got it. And initially, when you started off, who were your customers? How did you get to decide, these are the customers that we're going to target, and how do you get to those 1,000 first users?
Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning, we basically didn't pick. We just were with our network, with friends, previous collaborators, people that we worked with before, as any meetups or whatever. And we are very, very passionate at the time. The ecosystem was inexistent. Quip just got the week I started Slide, I started to code the first version of Slide. Quip got acquired by Salesforce for $1 billion, and Notion launched their V1. And they basically had still 2 years before being famous. So they were nobody in our space. They were Confluence, and there was Confluence, and there was Google Docs. That's pretty much it. And they were not really competing. They were a different world. So we were creating demand. And so what we did was just, going to every team out there and just selling and just, saying, what do you use for writing? Do you share? What are your habits around writing and sharing and so on? And what we realized is that often people had the reflex to write things down for themselves, but they didn't share after. And so this promise of saying like, well, do exactly the same, but by default, it will be shared and collaborative and accessible by anyone was really, really like good. So a lot of people really churned from Google Docs and Evernote at the beginning. So that was like the first version, and it brought us to our maybe, 100, 200 first active users. And then like the big kind of like extra push that we had before like going to raise the seed round was we managed to get like a couple of teams that were real teams, like, like real companies rather. So above 50 people. So we had like our first team of a SaaS called AB Testy in Paris. That was our first customer. That churned from Confluence to Slide with a product that was very young, like less than 1 year old at the time. And that was amazing. Like it was just, I didn't even know what Confluence was when I started Slide. So, having like a real company that had like, like real money, that had a real business problem, churning from an existing solution because to Slide, just because this thing, even if it was there that existed for 15 years, was just so slow and so, unintuitive to use. And so, full of friction. That was like the biggest validation that we could have. And then we reached this step. We were at like a few hundred active users. And in the same week, like I went to SF, my team was still in Paris. So we were 5 at the time. And they basically like coordinated the launch on Product Hunt at the time that worked super well. While opening to the beta list that we had like, grown in the few months prior. At the same time, I was doing kind of fundraising in SF. We had like the YC interview. So all these things kind of blended in a mix of very, very intense, like 3 weeks. And at the end of these weeks, like we basically got super good launch. It managed to get us into YC. It managed also to kind of like change totally like the dimension of our seed round at the time. And so all these things basically created a bit of interest in the market. We managed to get like a few, I mean, it's nothing compared to today, but like a few kind of 100 active users and so on. And to start to have like real kind of feedback, we understood, like we started to have like proper cohorts, started to have like a proper kind of users and so on. But so, like, I mean, to come back to the original question, like the first 1,000, which was like after a year and a half. I mean, of course, first 1,000, of course, like with a lot of, churn and so on, like the activation was terrible. Like the cohort, like, I mean, the cohort retained, which was like the biggest kind of like thing, like we still had like people that retain on the long run. That was amazing. But it was not like, like crazy growth machine. But yeah, like it was just, like very, very organic. And we just learned as we go, like who they were and why they were interested and how to do, replicate this.
Got it. Interesting. And, before the call, we were talking about, the challenges Slide faced, especially in the year one with the co-founder issues and with Notion also building up. What is your advice for, how to be resilient and, what were some of the lessons you learned from such failures on how to keep moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So yeah, like indeed, like in the first year, and we even wrote an article about that. So it's not private. Like my co-founder did a burnout. And yeah, like year 2, like we had like this kind of like, it's kind of like, being facing with Slack, right? Like in terms of like growth and valuation, like we had Notion like launching their V2 and we're like frontal with them. Like basically, we are still like, I think the #1 competitor of Notion if you look at competitiveness basically. And so, yeah, I mean, it was like definitely challenging. The good thing is that it's a roller coaster, we had like these lows, but we also had like massive highs. Like we had like incredible people that we found in the team. We managed to get into YC. So, big validation, especially at the time, like we were, not first time founder, but, like first time, like real company founder, let's say. We had like a massive seed round with Index, which at the time was, like insane for us. So I think having these eyes like helped a lot. And then like the second thing is I didn't realize that. I knew it like when I started Slide, like I did Slide with pre-seed investors, with friends from a startup studio in Paris called the eFounders. For one reason is I was very, very aware that this was like something that would be with a massive potential, like, we could have a massive scale. But that will take a lot of time, and that will be, like it will take time to generate like a significant revenue. It's not like a vertical fintech company or whatever, like where you can definitely, generate millions super fast. Of course, it's also super interesting to work on Slide. Like I love what I do every day. So, there is an upside, but it is definitely kind of hard to crack this market. Like what I told you before, we literally are like 4 or 5 in our market, like real players. It is incredibly hard to crack. And that's the thing that I didn't realize. And in a way, I think it's better, but it will definitely have like push my resilience to the max. Like when you look at all the players on our market, so Confluence, Bitcoda, Notion, Dropbox Paper a bit, Google Docs, of course, they all had like a genesis of like 7 years or 8 years. And, like a lot of them are not even like as evolved as what we do, right? They don't have databases or they don't have like a full structure or whatever. Like they can be, for instance, Dropbox Paper has tail that's being just a document. And I mean, it's just insanely long. And all the story that about these stories, about these companies, like if you look, they had like 7 years before working or 8 years before working. Coda, in the case of Coda, they had like this like 4 or 5 years of prior beta, but before that, they had 60 million of investment they won. So, it's actually like when you look back and you're like, oh my God, like this is like just an insane space, like just super, super hard to get there. So anyway, like this is definitely like a landscape that asks you for resilience. And I think not knowing was a big thing, just, not being aware of it. And then like, since everything that we did in terms of building the team, building the product, building the brand, we tried to kind of like put a lot of care in it. We basically built a capital. And then it was like harder and harder to kind of like look back. It was kind of like, well, we built all these things that are great and people love what we do. So, like we need to continue. And there is like something that is still there today, which is, like we built something that is so good, that is so nice, that people pay for and so on. We just can't stop there. Like it's, and, like now, obviously it's way easier because we are one of the only players on the market who can be, in real competition with all these players. There is only one way, forward. Like we can only like grow basically from there.
Correct. Super interesting. And you mentioned about YCombinator, and this is a question even I asked Anto Berjong from GitLab. What was the experience of YCombinator, and do you think I mean that time the cohort size was much smaller, but do you think it was worth it to go to YCombinator? What would be your advice to listeners who would want to apply for YCombinator?
So yes, it's worth it. It was not that small. We were like, I think in the 2 years after, like there was like a transition, like we were like already I think it was 120 companies. So it was about 300 founders.
Okay.
I mean, it was a great experience for very simple things. If you look at it on a purely financial level, I started to raise money. I was a European, right? Like I was French. I started to raise money and the valuation was basically 2 times under what I ended up raising with Index.
Oh, wow.
And honestly, the only things that changed in a matter of 2 weeks, because that was the time frame, was getting into IC or not. So if anything, for me, like the 7% that YCombinator took was worth it because of this mix. So that made it very easy to, to take any decision. And then like, of course, it was a kid's dream, like to go there. So kid, I don't know, but at least like I was definitely like when I started kind of looking at the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem, I fantasized on going there. And it was amazing to have the chance to go there. I think there are like things that are not as shiny as you can imagine. Like, like the batch are very big. You don't know everybody. If you are a B2B, you always expect, I think I spoke about that with a lot of B2B founder, you always expect to sell to all the people in the batch. And the reality is that often your product is not ready yet. So, like the Stripe story is amazing, but it's, like it's kind of like perfect timing. You have like other stories like that, like Deal, which is like a company that went maybe 2 years after us that, just absolutely exploded. Alex is like such a brilliant founder. And they obviously like manage after the batch, I think, because it was during COVID, to kind of like, like just take all YC companies, of course, or at least a lot of them. So anyway, there are like a few things like that, that are counterintuitive or that you expect from it, but it's so big. And that there is something that is a bit counterintuitive. we were lucky enough to be like on the, I think, I mean, I don't know what it means, but on the top of our batch. Like I know that a lot of company, you know, stopped since then. A lot of company didn't manage to grow or didn't manage to raise or whatever like was their need at the time. We are not in the massive, like the top 2 companies. Like we have, for instance, we have 2 companies from our batch that are amazing. We have a Replit, which is a coding environment, as demand, a really great guy and really brilliant founders, like there are a couple. And you know, like they were like definitely above the mass, but it's funny because you couldn't see it during the batch.
Yeah.
And you have Vanta, which was very clearly like, Vanta is a SOC 2 service provider.
Okay.
That is a Series B last year, a few, I don't know, last year or 2 years ago. Super impressive company. And same thing, like you couldn't see it during the batch. But you could know that, you know, like they had like something that was like, you know, like unique enough, vertical enough, and you know, like a high demand enough, like a lot of SaaS were growing and going to enterprise, so they needed that. So it made a lot of sense. But yeah, like you have this thing like during the batch where you kind of look at each other and you're like, shit, like now that we are there, great, like, you know, we've like achieved something, but it's actually like back to square one. Like, okay, you know, we need to kind of like be like exceptional even more now, you know. So I don't know, like there was all this thing, and then like of course the benefits, but that we hear all the time. The partners are absolutely incredible. It's hard to find people that are as smart as the partners, at least the vast majority of partners in YC. They have like a sum of knowledge based on the previous companies, especially because partners are usually focused on certain type of business. So, you know, like experts in SaaS will rather help SaaS founders. And so it means that every batch, so twice a year, they will listen to the metrics and to the challenges. So they don't share openly the metrics, but they can say, you know, for instance, one moment that I absolutely loved in YC was with Gustav, which is the previous head of growth at Airbnb for a long time ago now. Has been partner for a long time at YC. Very, very brilliant guy. And he has spoken so much about growth with so many companies that one office hour that we had like after the batch ended, like was basically, he told me, okay, bring your funnel, like give me all the numbers. And it basically was able to say, you know, like, okay, this is good, this is not good, this is good. And, you know, like it was amazing because this is like, we have like a very special model, right? It's per seat, freemium model based on virality, like, you know, like with a few things. And actually, if you look at my activation rate and you look at, for instance, Upflow, it's nothing alike. Like I have like so much more volume than him in terms of inbound, like of teams coming in. But he has maybe, I imagine, I don't remember his model, but I imagine that he has a gated, you know, beaucoup demo model, and you will have another teams that is like, you know, purely like you can't sign up if you don't put your credit card. All these models, they have different metrics, right? This is like one example of, oh my God, like, you know, YC delivering so much value instantly. Like, you know, like I could have like, I don't know if I would ever have like found these numbers by myself, basically. So yeah, that's really amazing. So these the advice of partners and the visibility that you get. And of course, the network, I still have a lot of these founders that are just friends. Like I have like, you know, like if anything, what's, you know, we have WhatsApp with French founder, and I live in Berlin, so I have WhatsApp with the German founders, or the German, actually it's much more international, but anyway. And you know, like getting advice from smart people that have gone exactly through the same thing as you, and sharing feedback, you know, in the other side, like, yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So the ecosystem of YC, I think, is probably like the best added value after.
Interesting. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think YCombinator gives that signal, but also the network which founders can tap into. And you know, I want to talk about remote, because you know, Slite's mission revolves around collaboration, and one of its values is remote work. And you were remote even before, you know, it became you know, fashionable to. I mean, because of COVID, you know, everybody had to keep it remote. But how can a company be remote and retain its values and culture, especially when it is really early stage, and you're looking to build your culture and build a bit of a camaraderie among your team? What is your advice on how to retain that values and culture?
You mean like by having people from multiple places, or?
Yeah, from multiple places, and you know, just working remotely. Is it possible to build like a unicorn from day one with being absolutely remote?
You know, it's interesting in a way, because I did ask myself that a lot, and it's still a question, right? Like we evangelize for remote. So of course we will, I mean, we could, but we are not that much vocal about these kind of questions. I have zero doubt that it's possible, but it's a very new model.
Yeah.
Before the COVID, there literally was maybe like 30 companies that you could flag online, find that were like explicitly remote, and maybe 1,000 of them that were like actually remote, but didn't necessarily speak about it. And the thing is, mostly these companies were valuing the flexibility it brought, the freedom it brought, and not necessarily like the hyper growth, like a unicorn experience and so on. And so I think we're already in this mood, like we're like a bit of strangers to the bootstrap style, or the kind of like I don't know, like the classic kind of like remote work style for some reason. But of course, like the COVID opened the door to many more companies in remote that like are able or are already in the unicorn area. So anyway, just to say, it is definitely possible. In terms of how we did, like we always were remote. So we say remote first, but not remote only. It is a spectrum, right? We sell an async solution. Like when you use Slide, you can work in async. You even have like a module to make decisions in async, like very clearly, like you have a decision-making module like in Slide in your document. So it's something that we push for. Like we try to reduce meetings. We try to make our customers reduce meetings to have like much more time for themselves and to unlock remote, of course. But we also like evangelize for the fact that you should meet. You should have synchronous activity for innovation, for brainstorming, and so on. And I think these activities are a big part of what makes the culture kind of spreadable. The whole part of culture working by writing, having transparency over the information, having shared ownership. This is kind of built-in remote. Like I don't think. Well, I'm saying that you do have remote companies that are very much like they track time and this kind of thing, but I guess there are two worlds. I do think for teams that have like quite senior people and that try to build advanced stuff, like if you work in remote, you need this ownership shared, you need this transparency, like it's kind of built in. And then all the rest of your culture, like honestly, like it gets built in your weekly updates, get built by the off slide that you do. Which rate do you do them? What do you encourage people to do? Do you encourage people to take one-on-ones like every week with all their teammates, all these kind of things? It's very simple stuff. What is very funny is that we kind of work in silo, like in bubbles, like each remote teams. And when you read online like how another remote team work, you can realize that actually their way of working, like they consider that this is the way to. I will give you an example, like the Doist founder Amir, which is a very smart guy, so big remote evangelist and so on. Yeah. Was sharing like the other day, like I keep hearing this tip. So him speaking, I keep hearing this tip that people should not work from where they live. Oh. And I disagree because my team, so his team, is for I think 90% like working from home, and the rest only while we pay for the co-working, like only the 10 other percent go there. And it's interesting because he was saying that as a general truth. And I mean, I could have done exactly the same, but in our team, it's the opposite. Like we pay for the co-working to everybody. Oh, okay. And we have like a vast majority of people that actually work and go there, like maybe not every day, but at least, twice, 3 times a week, and they use this possibility. And so whatever is the culture of your team, like around this kind of like, node of remote, actually like is widely dependent. And then it's like any company, right? Like it's just the way you communicate constantly about the way to work, like how you give example, for instance, to the founder take holidays, at which rate do the founders kind of like log in and log out at which time, do you ask for people to reply ASAP, or do you let them the time? Which tools do you put in place? Like if you put in place like a tool like Slide to have like async decision making, of course you are sending the signal that it's fine to not reply before tomorrow or even in a week. And that's a very, very different kind of like a nudge toward the team.
Got interesting. And I want to talk about the hiring process. How do you look at structuring the hiring process and ensuring that you have the right sort of talent who are working for you?
Well, it's interesting. We are a small team, but we are 40 people.
Yeah.
So relatively small. And we never had like a massive issue of like hiring at scale, right? Like we don't have like the issue of teams that needs operator or support or sales. So that has been a benefit because we can be very, very picky about who we hire. And then like, honestly, it's so tough. Like, I think we always had like terrific people, but first we probably were quite lucky. I think our brand, the way we speak about remote, the way we speak about our culture attracted people that were really connected. And when I look back, I think I don't know about this number, but it's the order of magnitude. 90% of our team comes from referral or from people that got touched by the brand. Like they didn't go through job boards or whatever, they knew Slide.
No.
Or the product, of course, but like they knew like who we were. And so I think in this context, people get attracted. They already are there for the right reasons. Like they are here because they like the product or because they like the brand. And I think that was like the most reason for us to kind of keep like a very, very, very strong culture and have like hires that were really connected to that. And then like the other question is how to find like the best people. And honestly, I can say from last year, like we've hired like an incredible team this year. Like the best people that we hired are absolutely phenomenal. And honestly, there is like a threshold. Like we put so much time into our brand, into our content, into what we speak about, like the topic that we talk about, and so on, and developing stronger opinions. And now it starts to pay off, and we have like more visibility and so on. And that just enabled to have like many more people that are actually interesting, that are actually skilled, that are actually good to come through the front door. But it took like so long.
Interesting. And especially when it comes to leadership roles, what does high performance mean to you for some of the leaders who are working for you?
It's a good question. I mean, what I can tell you is what we value in people, because high performance means the same as everybody, right? You commit to your goals and you achieve them. And if you don't, you are very clear and you don't do it twice, there is something simple there.
Yeah.
We spoke about that the other day with one of my teammates, like my head of brand. And like the thing that identifies at least all my leadership team, and I think like the people at Slide overall, is this mix of humble and nimble. So this mix of having high humility and, like being great at what you do.
Right.
But, like without getting over your head or whatever. And then nimble, so being a doer. We have like a significant team. Like you could have some people that are just there giving orders. It's really not our style. The people that lead teams like are still like very much like able to achieve what they ask their team to do. Maybe, like of course they need to have like people better than them around them, but they still are very good in what they do. And they still act on it every day. So yeah, I think this mix is for us what makes people exceptional besides pure performance.
Got it. And you've been working as a founder of for close around 6 years now. Well, what do you think has most changed as a leader over the last 6 years for you?
That's a good question. I mean, it's so many phases, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right now, and it's really making leaps because there are so many interludes in these phases. It started from me coding the first version of Slide.
Interesting.
Being with my co-founder and being like, really like much literally like just, developing all day and just creating the first thing. And then like with my first hire in a business development / sales and so on, that is still there and still leading this function now, going to sell it. So, like going from, I guess like the big path that I had like was doing all the IC job of Slide one by one. And every time that I actually tried to shortcut it on jobs that I didn't know how to do. So whether it's talent acquisition or marketing, which was a big one, it actually fired back. Like I needed to understand at least the basics of this role to understand who was really good at that and find the right person. So that was like I think like the phases were just like, like going from one role to the other, like understanding, finding somebody better than me, delegating, and going to the next. And now like I'm actually in a new phase where I finally have like a leadership team that is complete, where literally like every function of Slide I have somebody that is better than me. And so it's much more in terms of like the vision aspect of it, the kind of like, what's the next step, like how to kind of like drive the team. So really like a team energy / vision, product vision, quite interesting. And yeah, I mean, like the other kind of massive change, which is linked to our business, is that for the first 2 years of Slide, we were first in our market, or, the market didn't exist. So we were a category creator, which put us in a state where we showed that there was traction. We went to YC, we raised a seed round, amazing. And then like we had like a big competitor launching, Notion. And so for a few years, and they had like a lot of passive, right? Like they had 7 years of work behind. And so we needed to catch up. Like they were just basics of our, you need images. Yeah, I mean, it seems stupid, but like you didn't have images. And then you need tables, and then you need to drag, and then you need database, and then you need to have comments and sharing capabilities, and, import and export and whatever, like a lot of stuff line up. And so like for the next 2-3 years, like we were in catch-up mode, just, like doing the basics, like having to finish the core of the product. And then like, back into more kind of like, not category necessarily creation, but more kind of like positioning, like doing something exceptional for core user and making it very visible. So for us, it's teams that work by writing and really building the workflows that are like uniquely made for them, building decision-making. Yesterday and tomorrow, we are like really focusing on how do we put the organization on, how to make that their whole workspace self cleaned up, self-tidied up, self-nice, and they like can keep pushing content, which is the nature of like teams working this way in their workspace, and the thing remains up to date, relevant, and they only access relevant information. So yeah, like I mean, it was a big transition, and I can say for sure that I prefer this stage than the catch-up, because the catch-up mode, you just have to pull the team, behind you, and to say it will be good, like, like no problem, like the horizon is bright, and you just feel all the pressure and you feel the energy is not infinite, so yeah.
Got it. And on reflection, what do you believe are your biggest weaknesses today?
So it's interesting. I don't know if you ask for as a founder or as a company.
Yeah, as a founder.
It's funny because in a way I think it might be the same. I think the biggest one is like being visible. We are not like the most outspoken? Yeah, visible. Like we don't put ourselves
out there,
outside enough. And I think that has been kind of detrimental. But I also think that we didn't, because we were working on the product, and we are in a state now where we believe that we have the best solution in the market for like some people, and that changes a lot of things. But yeah, like I do think that as a person, and it's ripples down to the product and to the company. I think not being kind of like bullish enough and visible enough, and I hate people that like just brag and speak too loud, and I know like whatever they do, it's not as good as evangelize. Like it's a very, I guess, European maybe way of being, and it's not great. I mean, like I wish I was a bit more American sometimes. But yeah, I would say that that's the biggest weakness for me.
Very interesting. And I quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
Okay, so I mean, like you asked me that earlier, and I was thinking, okay, the best one, at least the one that I would recommend the most, is Radical Candor. So way to like manage your team, give feedback to your team, and build like a very, very strong relationship. I still believe that all the mistakes that I did in management, they were explained in the book, or like I could have like read it before and not make them. So yeah.
Got it. And if you could go back in time when you started building Slide, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
We did one thing that I think we did wrongly is for the. I mean, there are two things that could be this. Maybe one is the mistake, maybe the other is the mistake. When we were in this stage where, like we're in YC, Notion explodes, and then suddenly we realized that we need to catch up. We hired and we went from 8 people to maybe 16. So we doubled the team, still relatively small. And actually, like, there is a gap. Like a small team under 10 people, it's very easy to manage. Like everybody knows each other, everybody speaks to each other at least once or once every 2 weeks. Then like it's a new order of magnitude when you double, and you start to have like a bit of like a cascading effect and so on. And for the 2-3 years like of catch-up mode, just we needed to make basics like very good. We basically get distracted, and I mean the problem was also like in terms of product leadership. Like we were multiple. I had like a product lead, and we're in Insight. He's a great guy, but in Insight it was not the right person for the right time, I think. And we basically did at the same time catch up, like just making the fundamentals very good and differentiation. So just thinking, like how can we stand out on the market and so on. And I really think it was too early. We had stuff that already made us stand up. We had a lot of people that love like the UX and the accessibility of Slide. We had like some kind of like unique differentiation on our core DNA. We were made for teams. We were made for teams that love to work by writing. So teams that consider knowledge base and this kind of workspace in a different way. And, like at posteriori, that's what we did. And it works way better. Like, it's just logical with who we are and our journey. And I think we lost a lot of time by thinking about that. It was kind of being afraid. And so we did at the same time, like, like the fundamentals, what we needed to do. And like looking at, how can we stand out? And it's kind of like, yeah, but even if you try, you won't stand out because your basics are not good enough. And so you will kind of like confuse the learning. Like you will be like, did we not succeed with this kind of differentiation feature because the differentiation feature is not good? It's not for the good segment of market that we target or whatever. Or is it just because the basics aren't there? And I still have no idea. A lot of these things that we tried, I'm sure like could have worked in another time and so on. So yeah, this kind of like confusion of product goal was, I don't think I could have knew it before, but yeah, that would have made us win probably 1 year and a half.
Quite interesting. And do you have any favorite online tools, example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom, anything other than Slide?
I mean, right now, of course, like GPT, ChatGPT, but I mean, I literally spent my whole weekend on this, so I would say that this is probably a good one. In terms of other tool, like I mean, like just a classic. Like I use Slide and Slack every day. Right. Superhuman and Linear. Like that's my tool stack. I love these tools. They are reliable. They are fast. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Christophe, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about Slide?
On Twitter, probably at Christophe Pass. I guess you can put like maybe a small link. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Christophe, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Rohit.